Hello and welcome to Small Form Fact. Oh crap! I do that every time. I do that
That's
every
the first real
time.
flop you've done that.
I'm transferring smallformfactor.net. Get off me. Get off my case. All right, please hold. Hello and welcome to Low Volume SmallFormFactor.net's podcast. My name is Joshua Ramirez, and this is, I believe, the 10th episode. I think we've actually made it to 10 double digits. Good for us, I think. And in celebration, we actually have all 4 J's. That includes myself, Joshua Ramirez, a.k.a. Playful Phoenix. We also have James, a.k.a. Abophobia. James, how you doing?
Oh, doing good. Excited to talk about all the, somewhat lack of news at Computex. But yeah.
Excited to talk about all the non-things is what I got from it. We're also joined by Jay Madison, aka Tech Everything. Jay, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
And finally, we have John, aka Confucius, from Down Under. John, how are you doing?
No. Down Under is Australia.
The pause of judgment.
I'm offended.
I mean, New Zealand, Australia, basically the same, right?
Right, so I'm out of here.
Rage quit.
They're not touching? I thought they were touching.
No. I'll just drop the mic and walk away.
Well, with that fantastic start, guys, I think we all know what we're going to be talking about for this episode. Obviously, Computex just passed us by a little while ago, and per usual, saw quite the spike of coverage, not only on across the internet and various websites, but even here on smallformfactor.net on the forum, and of course now we're talking about it here on this podcast. I think. We have lots of stories, and we'll link to all of them in the show notes. And I figure we'll just kind of rapid fire go through each one of them and see what people's impressions are. But I also kind of wanted to go around the table and see what our overall impressions of Computex were as a whole, because I know for me personally, I actually had pretty high expectations going into it, especially since we were seeing some really neat power supplies, and it just, for whatever reason, I just felt like, ooh, there's lots of exciting stuff coming up to look forward to. There's lots of opportunity. And then we have Computex. Computex is over now, and I'm just like, oh, okay. I guess some of that was interesting. But overall, I was kind of disappointed, to be completely honest, because I think there are a lot of areas where I was hoping for more. At least when it comes to small form factor specifically, it seemed that some of the most exciting stuff we knew before Computex even began. So James, let's start with you. What was your impression of Computex as a whole?
Power supplies was awesome. We got kind of ahead of Computex, but we got like the 700 watt Silverstone, the 750 watt Lian Li SFXL, and then Silverstone's doing an 800 watt titanium rated unit. That's crazy. And then a couple other smaller players have SFX units, so that's awesome. Everything else kind of sucked, though. At least as far as the stuff I like. I mean, there was a lot of mini STX, which was kind of neat, but there's only one interesting mini ITX motherboard shown, the BioStar, and then basically no new micro ATX. There's a couple variants of previous boards, but nothing completely new or any refreshes of anything that's really exciting. So motherboards was disappointing, and then there was no cases. There's the BitPhoenix, and then Lian Li had one, and that was basically
well, CryoRig had one too.
Oh yeah, CryoRig, yeah. Though both of those they're cool, but they're not particularly small. So yeah, I was really disappointed on cases. And then didn't really see a whole lot for cooling or anything. Lots of M.2 though, so really nice to see kind of more options for storage. But yeah, motherboards and cases is just yeah. I really wish there was more. That was rather disappointing for me.
Yeah, I have to say I was personally disappointed by the utter lack of SATA Express drives. I say that with only the utmost sincerity. No sarcasm intended at all. Jay, how about you? What were your thoughts?
I mean, I have similar sentiments to you guys. It was, I will say this, it was interesting if you're not in the small form factor community. I mean, I thought there were a lot of really cool cases in larger formats, but for SFF stuff, there just really wasn't that much. The power supplies, like you mentioned, I was really, really hoping that we were going to see some more mini ITX boards, maybe even for Broadwell's some 2011 socket ones, because really there's just the one on the market, but there wasn't anything. So that was kind of disappointing, but that's kind of par for the course these days, and with these big shows, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of used to just not seeing that much going on in our world, and I don't know, it certainly feels like the trajectory of the industry has been improving for us in that regard, so maybe that just sort of set us up for expectations that exceeded what was reasonable to expect. For me personally, the lack of any real movement in the MATX space in terms of motherboards is really the more disappointing thing. But ITX was not immune from that either. John, how about you? What was your impression?
I think there's more focus on LED control than anything that we're interested in, to be honest. Everything was RGB lighting on damn near everything. that was it. It was just, yeah. I didn't see anything I was particularly interested in apart from the cryo-rig cases.
Okay, well, we'll definitely talk about those. I actually was gonna start by saying one of the enclosures that came out, and I think James mentioned it, that I did want to talk about. So Bitphoenix announced a selection of cases, and this was near the beginning of Computex, I believe. And one of the cases they announced. So I'm gonna up front, I'm gonna say I think the name is incredibly stupid.
But it perfectly describes it.
It does.
Really?
It really does.
You look at the case, and that's.
I want to lay on it.
So it's called the Bitphoenix Pillow. I'm trying to think of nice things to say about it. I mean, one of the interesting things they did is, presumably they're using a ribbon cable here, but they've oriented it such that the case is kind of like rounded, and it has these feed, and it's got the I/O, but it's like on the side, and the design is interesting overall. It's kind of bulbous and this rounded rectangular prism in such a way that you can see why they decided to call it the Pillow, I guess. One of the interesting things about it for people that are listening and can't see a photo is that the top of the enclosure is clear, so it's sort of like a rounded domey window. And they've oriented the components in such a way such that, and someone can confirm this with me, but I assume you're using a ribbon cable or some such thing, but they move your graphics card to the top of the enclosure. So when you're looking into the enclosure, you see sort of your graphics card like perched up top, and you've got a nice window into it, and it really allows you to kind of show off that particular piece of hardware. I don't know if there's a real cooling or other practical benefit to them doing it this way, but the visual of the aesthetics of arranging it in that way is interesting, to say the least. So this is a ITX motherboard system. I believe it supports an AIO if you want to use that to cool your CPU. It supports full-length graphics cards, so when you think of flagships on either the AMD or an NVIDIA side, you should be good to go. I don't know what the volume is. It looks to be at least 20 liters, though.
It's a full-size card there. So, full-size graphics card there. So it's got to be fairly large.
Yeah.
Yeah, my estimate was about 20 liters, excluding the feet.
Okay. I think that's a reasonable estimate. But yeah, I mean, am I correct in that it uses a ribbon cable to perch the graphics card up there?
I'm not sure. I had linked a video in the show notes that had a little bit more detail. So, like, one interesting thing about it actually is that the like kind of like the interior frame that everything's mounted to actually slides out the back of the case. So it's got kind of like a removable tray, I guess you could say, and it's kind of hard to tell from the video, but it looks like it may actually just be like an inverted layout rather than using a cable. Yeah, actually, I guess it doesn't, maybe it doesn't use a cable. But yeah, cooling because of that, though, is going to be pretty limited because the case is fairly narrow compared to the other dimensions.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't find it particularly exciting, but it's just the name. I don't care if it looks like a pillow.
It's different. I kind of like the way it looks. It looks alien. I don't know. It looks different. I'd be worried a little bit about the cooling for the graphics card. It doesn't appear to have a ton of ventilation around it from the pictures, at least. But I do think it looks kind of cool.
I mean, because in the video it's not clear; it's like solid.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not vented though, so I'm not really sure how exactly ventilation is supposed to work in this thing. It definitely looks pretty iffy. So I mean, it looks very much like a prototype. Like the physical unit in the video looks kind of rough, and then the only other pictures they've ever shown of it are renders. So I wouldn't be too surprised if, like, during testing they find that this just doesn't work, and they end up having to like put a mesh for the top.
Yeah.
Because it's just gonna suffocate. I mean, they have like a reference blower design, which would be okay, but man, you put any kind of like non-reference cooler in there, and it's gonna just toast the insides.
It's a heated pillow.
But like performance, I don't know. We'd expect it to be amazing. I wouldn't expect it to be bad. Like if anything, the fact that they've segregated the video card in this way would probably help it a little bit, since it would have its own channel of air to take in and air to exhaust and all this. So. The bigger question to me would be whether or not you could get away with using like an open air cooler or something like that.
Yeah. Guess we'll have to wait until it's released.
Yep, pretty much. There were some other items from BitPhoenix as well. I don't know that any of them were small form factor related, though. I think the pillow was kind of the main thing.
They weren't.
Yeah. So I figured we can just skip these. The other case that came out of interest, and this was particularly the case because, as far as I know, this is the first time CryoRig has even gotten into cases. But they announced 2 enclosures, and both of them are, in my opinion, would qualify as small form factor, or at least intended to be small form factor. They have the Taku, which is sort of an interesting enclosure in a number of fronts. It's pretty darn small. It's meant to sort of be very compact and great for like throwing on a desk, insofar that it's like a monitor stand, so you put your monitor on top of it and you can kind of slide your keyboard underneath. It's got what look to be real wooden feet, as well as sort of an aluminum exterior. So in terms of the materials choice, it's sort of unusual. And then they had some relatively clever ideas with some of the ways they've gone about building it. So basically, the whole enclosure, you can pull out the front like a drawer to get access to all the internals and whatnot. And then there are actually some slits at the top of the enclosure, and those are handy because it allows you to feed in cables from devices and whatnot that are nearby, and you just sort of cleanly feed them into these slots, and then you can hook them up to your computer. So it's sort of intended to keep things nice and clean and compact. Certainly a very modern look. They call it the designer look, the ITX PC monitor stand. So, I think there's a certain segment of the market that'll appreciate it. And in terms of the dimensions, I'm seeing 567 by 134 by 270 millimeters, 8 kilograms of weight. Obviously, it's a mini ITX enclosure. In fact, I think both the enclosures that CryoRig announced are mini ITX. I don't have any particularly strong feelings about it. I do think that for a first product, it looks nice. The wooden feet is a little unusual, but for the product they seem to be intending to make, I do think it actually kind of works and makes sense. Didn't know if you guys had any thoughts or opinions beyond that.
I love the Ola. I think it's one of the. I mean, obviously the cylinder design's been done, but I just think it's a really cool and good looking case.
Well, yeah. So the Ola was the other enclosure they announced, and obviously we've seen a number of these sort of cylindrical Mac Pro inspired enclosures, for lack of a better way to put it. So this one, whereas the Taku is pretty straightforward and nothing particularly special about the layout or anything like that. It's just sort of, well designed, and it's Cryric's first case and whatever. The Ola is decidedly more exciting in a number of fronts. So first off, it's definitely intended to support, enthusiast grade hardware. It supports full-length graphics cards, and you can sort of stuff in there both a standard SSD as well as like a 3.5-inch drive. The enclosure itself basically has a 140 mil fan mounted at the top that provides kind of the cooling down both sides or chambers, and basically provides the primary cooling for everything. And then it looks to me as if basically what they've done is for the I/O and such, actually, I would like to ask you guys how they're doing this, because as I'm looking at the photos, they have the I/O for both of them at the top of the case, it seems like.
I thought that it came out of the side. I thought
it looks like it's going to loop up over the top and out that little flap out the side.
Yeah, so, okay. All right, that makes sense.
Which is very clever.
It'll keep. You'd have a nice thin strip of cables coming out the side, out of the back of it, so it'd be really easy to cable manage.
Right, really versus like having them sprout out the top. Because I'd figured, like, when you think of how to do it, or the way that others have tried to do it, it usually tended to be like just have everything coming out from the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. Which would work to a point.
Or you have some sort of proprietary back panel like the Dune case tried to do.
I think
which has its own challenges, yeah.
I think the easiest way to think of it is like a vertical version of the way the Fortress Mini works, the FTO3. How all the cables come out in a different area than where the back panel is. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of like...
to hide it all.
So in terms of size, I mean, obviously, it's not like the most compact, smallest thing in the world, but I don't really hold that against it terribly much, insofar that I think the component support is good. Aesthetically, I think they did a really good job. It's got a very nice, interesting top sort of grate or panel, sort of these tessellated circular wedges with contrasting... I don't know how you describe it. You just sort of have to look at it, but it looks nice. And then in terms of the exterior itself, it's got like this sort of brushed metal appearance with like a handle, or a latch to open it up that sort of integrates and sits flush when it's closed. So like a portion of it is this brushed metal, and a portion of it is the plastic. But I mean, especially considering this is their first enclosure, I was actually pretty darn impressed. Like,
yeah, it's very bold.
A lot of the, it's very bold. It looks nice for what it is, and the more you look at it, the more it's clear that they're actually relatively thoughtful about how to execute on some of these things. So I don't know if we got, or go ahead.
I did have a question about. I was just wondering with them, with the Taku. Like, I get the whole minimalist silver, white, and wood, but I would have thought that they would have offered that also in a black or something. I mean, to only offer it in that color scheme is going to be fairly limiting for some people.
Well, you got to keep in mind that this stuff
aren't going to want that.
Yeah. This stuff's not coming out to the end of the year, so everything's subject to change. And saying that, I think the brushed aluminium and the wooden feet do work quite well together. And to be honest, if the Taku does come out in looking the way it does, if it hits the market as currently designed, I will be definitely getting one and running it as my main system, because that's.
I wonder how much they'll price that.
Right, so I'm wondering the price, and the other thing that's been confusing me about it is the way that they've been marketing it. It's like if you go on their website and you look at the marketing materials, they're all like, "Oh, this is a great home theater PC, and you can do gaming and all of this. And I was just like, that's an interesting vertical to be targeting with this, because like generally speaking, the moment you say home theater PC, people are like, well, I want this to fit on a shelf with all of my other equipment. And like the whole point of this thing is that like, no, you want this to be visible and kind of prominent, and the last thing you're going to do is put this on a shelf because it's not going to fit because it's a big cylinder.
But in saying that,
I guess this will be like a
Straycom's
next
also
TV thing.
Yeah, Straycom's also kind of looking at that angle as well, but we'll get into that. The whole home theater PC, but it being a designer piece.
Yeah, I mean, I will say calling it like a designer enclosure, that makes sense to me. I think that's reasonable. Hopefully, I mean, I would say it's unreasonable if like it looks nice in pictures and then you get it and it's like chintzy and plasticky and awful. So given that this is their first go at it, I would say, I'm going to restrain a bit of enthusiasm until we can get some reviews and have some people spend some time with it. But I mean, I think it's, for a first enclosure and a first enclosure of this kind, I think it's great. I'm really.
What price point would you guys be willing to pay for?
Which one, the Ola or the Taku?
Go both. So Taku, then Ola.
Ola would probably be what, 100 to 150 US. Ola probably slightly less.
And that would is that what you're thinking the price is going to be, or is that what your budget?
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking the price is.
Oh, no way! Oh, it's going to be more than that. Oh,
I don't
way
think it
more.
will.
There's not that much to them.
Yeah, I don't think it will be. If it's more than $150, I mean, I guess it could be.
I think 150 is a reasonable guess. I would not. I think guessing lower would be asking.
The Taku has to be
for
under
a lot.
$100. It has to be.
I don't know, because you've got that's an aluminum enclosure using natural materials.
Well, that's true.
If I had to guess, the Taku is probably going to be like 129, and the Ola is going to be like 149, 159. If I had to guess.
So pretty much the price bracket I said.
You could get Lian Li cases, all aluminum, similar form factor.
But
for
Lian Li
$100.
Yes, but Lian Li has been exactly. They're a bigger company that's been in the business for a long time.
Yeah,
and CryoRig is an upmarket with a brand new product. Like it's
that's a tough one to swallow.
We'll see. I'm also curious as to how you'll be able to get them. I don't know if they're going to sell through Newegg or not.
Right.
I would think so.
How do you guys get CryoRig?
Their other products are available at standard retailers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm expecting it, but I just don't know. Like, beyond the information they released, who knows?
Yeah. I'm going to have to import. Yeah. If I'm going to get one, I'm going to have to import it. There's no CryoRig retailers in New Zealand. Cannot buy it on the retail market here.
Where's CryoRig based?
Taiwan, I think.
Interesting.
I think it's founded by former, I think it's people from, maybe Antec or Cooler Master or something like that. Like, they kind of split off and made their own company. So, I think the team is kind of drawn from some of the big PC hardware companies.
Okay, fair enough.
According to their website, members of their team have either worked directly or indirectly with brands such as Thermalright, Prolimatech, Vantex, and many more. So there's definitely the experience there.
All right, well, I think we've talked about these enclosures as much as we can. I mean, they were definitely the most interesting of what was there.
For us.
Again, for us at least, yeah. I just wish there was more of stuff of that level of being interesting for MATX, but I guess not. But it's not like I'm bitter, not at all, not at all bitter. Moving right along. This was an announcement that was widely expected, and I actually wrote about. Intel's Broadwell E. Intel announced immediate availability during Computex, although parts immediately sold out after following this announcement of immediate availability. So I guess you'll have to just decide for yourself what defines immediate availability. In any case, most of the information with respect to performance or tiers had been leaked well before this announcement. It took Intel quite a long time to get to the point where they could announce this. But just to sort of walk you guys through, and for those that aren't aware, Broadwell E and the LGA 2011 socket is basically just a step up from the traditional consumer versions. So i3, i5, i7s. Those will be like 2 cores, 4-core, not hyper-threaded, 4-core hyper-threaded. So Broadwell E is just meant to be like, okay, it's still desktop, but it's like enthusiast grade or professional grade. So it's like the next step beyond that, which means that, in terms of number of cores, it scales up. It starts at 6 and now goes up as high as 10. And then you have hyperthreading on top of that. So it's really, really great for workflows that involve things like editing video or, doing a lot of rendering or other processing. But of course, with these scales and performance, you get scales and pricing to match. And in fact, for this particular generation, given that there isn't really an AMD competing directly with Intel at all in this price segment, Intel seemed to feel pretty free to just rise prices up and up and up and up and up. So the current, if we ignore the cost of motherboards, which is not insignificant, but just for the sake of simplicity, if we ignore that for now, the entry price of Broadwell E is now $434. That gets you the i7 6800K, and that's a 6-core part that has 3.4 base, 3.6 gigahertz boost, 15 megs L3 cache, and of course only 28 PCIe lanes. For the entry level, they always artificially limit the number of PCIe lanes because they're jerks. If you want to step up and relinquish that control and get the full 40 PCIe lanes, you have to pay $183 more. For the 6850K, that costs just over $600. Although you also get slightly faster base and boost clock speeds of 3.6 and 3.8 gigahertz. From there, you have the stupidly expensive parts. The next step up is the 6900K. That's an octa-core chip. That slows down the base clock to 3.2, although the boost clock is still 3.7. Obviously, again, that's not going to be a great thing for your web browser, but if you're, rendering video or something, then you benefit far more from 8 cores than, even if they are a little slower. The price of that guy is just under $1,100, $1,089. And then they also have, as they've had in the past, an Extreme Edition, the 6950X. That's a 10-core desktop chip, which I believe is the first 10-core desktop chip ever sold by Intel. That has 25 megs of L3 cache instead of 15. The speeds are 3.0 base, 3.5 boost, so again, a little slower, but you also have more cores. That guy costing a ludicrous $1,723. So to go from a 8 core that's a little faster to a 10 core that's a little slower, you're basically paying an extra like $650. If you look at the picture in the article, it's a black box with gold lettering. I'm guessing that lettering is actual gold, because then you could begin to explain that horrendous price point. Beyond that, everything else kind of boring. Those are the parts. They're available immediately, but they sold out pretty fast. Hopefully, stock will return soon if it hasn't already. In terms of boards, backwards compatibility with existing boards, although most will require firmware updates in order to ensure compatibility. Lots of manufacturers have already since posted those updates, however. So for anyone that's kind of interested in this right now, you shouldn't have to worry. Generally speaking, any board that was compatible with the previous enthusiast tier will be compatible with this newest clutch from Intel. I don't know if there's much more to add to this other than I'm upset with Intel, that they sort of let themselves do this price inflation just because they could. But B, that they've continued to have the lowest end version of this restrict the number of PCIe lanes, especially when you're looking at folks that are trying to do multiple GPUs or have lots of storage, like with M.2 now being a thing, or just lots of PCI devices, artificially limiting the lanes for no real purpose other than to try to squeeze an extra few $100s out of folks certainly is, they're well within their right to do it, right? Like, Intel made the parts, they can do whatever they want, but it definitely is the sort of thing where you just are left with a very bad disappointing taste in your mouth of just like, wow, this is a company that's squeezing money out of me because they can, not because like that extra money is delivering much in the way of value. So I don't know. I'm happy that these are finally here. The performance gains compared to the previous generation are pretty minimal and uninspiring. I know there are some additional changes in terms of the ability for newer boards to have different I/O and some other underlying technologies that are sort of a nice to have, but this is probably the most boring enthusiast release of parts that I can recall in quite some time. It's been a long time coming, and furthermore, to have that alongside just the feeling of being totally robbed blind by Intel when it comes to some of this pricing, you know, it's just sort of like, all right, well, this is a thing. Okay. So what are your guys' thoughts? Like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that 10 core. Ooh.
I mean, it's $1,800.
The pricing on it's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, the whole 28 lane versus 40 lane, I mean, for somebody who just needs CPU power and has no need for GPU power and so doesn't need a bunch of lanes, I consider that somewhat acceptable. I mean, I'd love to have a 40 lane on the entry part, but I mean, whatever. But yeah, the 10 core, like, why? Like, you can, I think Jord mentioned it in the chat that, I mean, you could buy dual Xeons and get more cores and more RAM and more everything for like just as much money, if not less. So it really, I don't know. It's just extremely disappointing that they just priced it in the stratosphere. It's stupid.
Yep.
Guessing there won't be a lot of sales on that part.
I mean, it's a good question. You would think so, but at the same time, it could just be that the sorts of people that would have bought it at a lower price point are not going to care. Like, they're so insensitive to the ultimate dollar figure that it's just like, oh, $300? I made that in the time it took for me to say $300. So, you know,
the performance gains are more concerning to me. I mean, you're not really gaining much when you're with A, the generational leap, and B, going 8 to 10. I was looking at some reviews on it, and you're really not gaining a ton, especially for the price. I mean, I would have thought it would be substantial, but it really isn't.
No, it's not. It's really disappointing. And, you know, like, if you had that, then, like, again, like, all you would need is for one of these things to change, like the pricing is lower or the performance gains are higher, and you would just feel a lot less bad about it, because you would be able to refrain and be like, oh, well, the pricing is ridiculous, but the performance improvements are great, or like, oh, I mean, well, yeah, the performance improvements aren't that great, but the pricing is aggressive. No, it's just not everything about it's just bitter disappointment.
Yeah, now maybe in 6-8 months when prices come down a little, stuff starts going on sale, maybe they might make a little more sense. Because I've already seen Micro Center has the 6800K for $400, which, you know, for a brand new chip, 6 cores, that's not terrible. But when it comes down a little bit on all of them, maybe they might be a little better value. But as it stands right now, it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see.
Can we talk about like how AMD just completely failed on the Zen announcement? like
they let everyone down.
Oh, because I watched the whole thing. It's like, oh,
I was like, and with like that video that was like super intense music, like Zen is here. Which, by the way, one of my favorite things about the AMD event was like they would, you know, transition from playing the video full screen to people watching the stream, and then like back to the audience, and like the audience is so nonplussed. they're just like, yeah, whatever. And so you're like all super pumped up and super excited, and then just everyone's just standing there. It's like, oh. Okay. and then they proceeded to spend exactly like 4 minutes It's super exciting. Here are all these details you guys already know, and we can't wait to tell you more 6 months from now. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone, so much. That's what they did.
Maybe they're just a company of trolls.
I mean, I guess I don't know. I was but here's the other thing too, is that like, so yeah, Zen was a disappointment and stupid in all of this. The graphics announcement, on the other hand, the RX 480, very interesting. Very interesting. Going into this, I remember, and we talked about it on the podcast and on the forums for sure. It's been a very hot topic of conversation both before and after the fact. But there was sort of the understanding and anticipation that, okay, like, this isn't Vega, which is supposed to be like the high end, like the replacement for, the Fury X, whatever. This is Polaris. This is, lower price points. This is lower end parts. When you think about things that NVIDIA's recently released, this isn't going to directly compete against them. And that's mostly still true. But what I think people didn't expect was for them to be very aggressive in terms of the perf per dollar pricing of the part that they announced. Because with the RX 480, we'll see what happens in terms of pricing once it actually lands. But the 4 gig card, which has something over 5 teraflops of compute. They haven't given us enough specifics to sort of be able to directly calculate that. Starts at $199. When you consider that the GTX 1070, which is just over 7 teraflops, starts at nearly twice as much money. So you're saying like a 40% improvement in performance for a nearly 100% price increase. That's crazy. Literally for just a little more than the price of a GTX 1070, a person could theoretically buy 2 of these cards of the RX 480, and that'll almost assuredly defeat it in terms of not only raw performance, but probably a lot of games. You have Crossfire, so it's not a totally fair comparison because frame rate issues and all the inelegant aspects of using multiple cards, let alone using multiple AMD cards. But I personally am very, very excited at the idea that for just $200, you're able to get this level of performance. And I'm also happy, as someone has mentioned in the chat, that I like that there isn't like a Radeon Plus edition of this card that launches for the first few weeks for $50 more, and then eventually you can get the regular version. It's a nice touch. Thank you for not doing that, AMD. But yeah, so like on the forum, I was doing the math with folks because I had been very excited about NVIDIA's parts and NVIDIA release stuff, and overall I was like, okay, I think generally met expectations, maybe beat them in some small ways, but overall I was like, okay, like I was excited, people are excited, and we got the reviews, and I think people are right to be excited. Like, these are great parts, they're super efficient. From a performance per dollar perspective, they're by far and away the best value purchases, especially the 1070, now that reviews have come out for it. And, I did the math, and I showed folks, like, okay, if you look at today's pricing for old parts versus new parts, the perf per dollar improvement is like 40%. And 40% is a pretty good amount, right? Like 40% is it's a nice jump, especially when you're saying it's a 40% improvement when compared to last generation hardware with today's prices, because that gives older hardware the best possible chance to be competitive, since the pricing goes down for it as time goes on, and so it's more competitive for what it is. AMD, with this release, is clobbering the hardware that NVIDIA just announced. Not like a year and a half old hardware that when AMD did its announcement wasn't even available yet. The RX 480 kills the GTX 1080 by over 70% performance per dollar. With the 1070, it still manages to beat it by over 40%, which I'll remind you is the same improvement that NVIDIA got against its own year and a half old hardware. And, the RX 480 is going to be available at around the same time that the MSRP priced 1070 hardware is going to be available from NVIDIA. We'll get the Founders Edition stuff earlier, but that stuff is priced higher because you're paying for the fancy cooler and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to be really curious to see if NVIDIA feels immediate pressure to respond in terms of a price drop. My guess is not. And if they don't, then my secondary hope is that AMD sells a crap ton of these cards and is able to really get back a lot of market share, particularly at the lower end. But most importantly, I mean, the fact that you can get roughly 5 T-flops worth of performance, which would peg it at around GTX 80 to 980 levels at the $200 price point, is a massive win for the industry as a whole and for consumers. I mean, most people tend to live at this price point. Obviously, we tend to get more excited about higher price points because that's where we tend to live at. But most folks that have computers or are building their own computers or are even gamers are going, their budget is going to keep them at around $200 being the maximum that they can spend on a graphics card. And so I think there's some definite kudos to AMD for really making a point of being pretty aggressive in terms of what you can get for your dollar at that price range. And I really can't wait to see the hardware implementation and how they were able to hit that price point and provide this performance. I can't wait to learn more details about the silicon and just everything they did to construct this thing. I can't wait to see reviews. I know there are probably things we don't know about that will add some necessary context when really being able to critically evaluate the card. But just as I was excited about NVIDIA's parts when they shared their information, I'm as excited, if not more excited, about AMD's work here, and I really, really can't wait to learn more. I'm very happy. This was unexpected for me, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to substantially improve their gaming experience for not terribly much money, and that's always an exciting thing.
Yeah, I'm just disappointed that we're not going to see anything more powerful than this for a while, though. I mean, there's kind of rumors that we may see some kind of like 490 variant. But those are all rumors. And then the real big chip, the Vega, is not going to be out till I think late this year at the very earliest, and probably won't be till next year. But yeah, for this price point though, it is very, very compelling hardware. So yeah, I'll be really interested to see. Though one thing that annoys me though is that they made a big deal about how this is like the cooling and the shroud and everything is like a premium design, which it kind of shares some similarities to like the reference Fury X and the Nano, but it's just a cheap blower card that extends past the PCB. Like there's nothing super premium about this.
I mean, and maybe, but it's a good point. Maybe because going into this, again, like we were having the conversation and saying like, oh man, super depressing, not terribly exciting. It's going to be a low-end part. The high-end stuff isn't coming for some time. And it's not as if all of that isn't still true, but, maybe that conversation set expectations in such a way that AMD was kind of poised to really surprise people with how far they'd be able to go, given those constraints of like, okay, but this is Polaris, this is the price segment that we're going to be living in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a fair point, and for sure, like, I mean, the 1080, I'm not arguing that this part is going to compete against the 1080. So I wouldn't really expect any movement there from NVIDIA or, anything really exciting to happen there until Q4 at the earliest. But I do think for the bottom half of the market, I mean, obviously for all the old hardware that lives at the 200 or less price point, but even, the 349 MSRP 1070, I think this is really interesting. I think it's I just wonder if NVIDIA was really expecting AMD to be as aggressive as they were, because like if you do the math, if you kind of reverse it and say, okay, well, if AMD wanted to be like, I don't know, 10-15% perf per dollar advantage over comparable things in that segment leading up, running up to the 1070, then they really should have released a card that was about 20% less powerful than it is. And that's 20% doesn't sound like much, but it's an ocean of a difference, especially at the low end. Like to say, okay, how do we turn this 4 teraflop card into a 5 teraflop card? That is not a easy thing to do. My guess is And so as we've learned more information, it looks to be a 150 watt power card. My guess is, they're basically riding the efficiencies driven by the 14 nanometer process node, and that the die size of this card is puny, but they're just pushing it for all it's worth in terms of clocks. And they're just saying, okay, well, this thing could consume only 80 watts. Now it's going to consume as high as 150. And we're okay with that gross inefficiency from an energy standpoint because we can convert all of that into even more performance. And that allows us to, keep the die size small, which keeps our expenses low, which means that we can deliver a lot of performance for a relatively low price point. And the only cost is a TDP that people won't really care about because it's still within the realm of what's considered reasonable at that size and at that performance level. So again, we don't know enough to understand a lot of AMD's thinking or a lot of how they built this, but as we learn more, I think it'll be interesting to explore. And it's just a spectacle in its own right, and it's fun to sort of talk about it and postulate as to how AMD built it or what their thinking was behind it. So yeah. And that's all the exciting graphic stuff for the year.
Yeah.
Now we're done.
I was reading, I can't remember what website it was. I think it was Tech Power Up. Basically, everything's been pushed back to Q4. So we've got Zen in Q4, we've got the next gen Intel chips in Q4 because they've been pushed back now. Obviously, got the higher performance AMD cards. So much for Computex being exciting. Everything exciting is coming in Q4. So even the cryo cases are Q4.
Pretty much. Oh well.
It gives us more time to save up.
Yeah. That's a good point. On that positive note, I'd like to move on to what's next in our list. This is more interesting than exciting. I think, James, you wrote up this piece, so I was going to look for your thoughts. But so I remember last year when Noctua was at Computex, they had a prototype slim 15 mil fan. And we were excited. I mean, they'd shown it a few times before. It didn't really look like they'd made any progress, but we were at least excited at the idea of it because, there are lots of instances in which you can fit a 15 mil fan and you can't fit a 25 mil fan in a small system, especially if you're plopping that guy on a radiator. And, thin fans are okay, but they tend to be noisy or the bearings suck or whatever. And so here's Noctua being kind of like the company that doesn't release a product they can't stand behind and is really just cares a lot about the technology they use and the implementation of it as such. And so they had what looked to me to be a much more complete version of this thin fan. The bad news is that I believe they changed the bearing type. I guess they couldn't find a way to get the typical FDM.
No, so what it is like Tech Power Up, for some reason, like the picture they had of like the little placard sitting next to the fan was really blurry. And then the text in their article said that it was ball bearing, which I was kind of suspicious of because that'd be very out of character for Noctua. But yeah, like later on, once we got kind of like the official press photos from them, it is their kind of SSO2 like enhanced FDB.
Oh, awesome! So, hey,
yeah, so that's good. Because I can't stand ball bearings, so that would have been horrible if they had used it. But yeah, it's taken a long time. I think they first showed it off at Computex 2014, so 2 years ago, the original prototype. But yeah, now because the first prototypes are kind of like yellow plastic, like prototypes plastic, I guess. But now we have what looks to be kind of like a pre-production model. So, and I think they've said that they're targeting second half of this year if they don't run into any problems with the reliability testing. So hopefully we'll see it in the not too distant future. Because I'm really excited for it. Because like I've owned several slim 120mm fans, and I've not really been happy with any of them. They're either just kind of noisy or ball bearing noise or stuff like that. So really looking forward to this and testing it out and trying them out. Yeah.
Can't wait to spend $25 on this fan. I'm very excited.
Yeah, that is the downside. Is it's gonna be expensive.
But you get what you pay for with them. You know, I'm super happy with all of my Noctua fans.
Yeah, you really do. Like, it's just the reliability to me is like one of the best parts. Is that like I have some that are like 7-8 years old, and bearings on them still sound like perfectly fine, just like when it was new. So yeah, I got the Slim 120, and then so basically they're going to do an update to the NHL12, and as far as I can tell, like the heatsink's exactly the same. They're just swapping out the stock fan with the Slim 120, so then that way, like it'll have a little bit lower profile with the fan mounted on top. So not really anything different there, other than just it comes with the new fan. And then we saw a bunch of like small fans, so I think from 40 millimeters up to 80 millimeter. And I think the 40 millimeters, 20 millimeter thick, and then everything else like the 50, 60, 70, and 80 were all 15 millimeter thick. But they all look to be in, other than the 40 millimeter, the other ones look to be in fairly early prototype stages. So who knows when we'll see those on the market. The other thing they released or they showed off was like new little rubber anti-vibration mounts, which I really liked the new design, because the old one were really designed for 25 millimeter thick fans, and so using them on anything else was kind of hit or miss. So the new ones basically have like little notches for basically every thickness of fan you would want to use. So like I think from probably 15 millimeter up to 25 millimeter and everything in between. So that way you can kind of just pull it through to the notch size that you need, and it'll hold the fan in place. So other than that, we didn't really see a whole lot from them. Noctua is very conservative on their product releases, so it's not unusual for them to like take 2 or 3 or 4 years for them to really perfect a product and that they're happy with.
Yep. I mean, that's just how they roll, and that's fine, but we're impatient and want these things now, so. All right, but that's cool. So, I don't know, maybe we'll see some of it this decade.
one can rush perfection.
But speaking of products that took forever to launch, and this is obviously something that came out before Computex, but I want to spend some time talking about it. Silverstone's 800 watt SFXL titanium power supply. So James, there's actually a bit of a story behind this, because we were able to learn of it and inquire about this power supply before they even announced anything. And that was all you're doing. So I was hoping you could sort of tell us that story.
Okay. So while I was researching the Lian Li PE 750 review, like one of the things I did to verify that who the OEM was is that like a UL, like they do a lot of like safety testing for like consumer products, so you probably have seen like UL markings on various electronics and stuff, and so it just shows that it's undergone the safety certification. And they maintain a directory of manufacturers. It's just like a big old listing, and so they have different codes for them. So I was looking up the one for the Lian Li power supply, and I was just double checking the UL listing number on the power supply on the sticker, and looking it up against the UL directory. And I noticed that it was enhanced, which is what I expected. They're the OEM for it. But also under the same enhanced listing as the PE750 was a bunch of other numbers. So I saw the SX700 LPT, SX750 LPT, SX800 LPT, I think, and an SX800 LTI, which was Silverstone's model number scheme. That would translate to a 800 watt SFXL titanium fully modular. But it's like, it didn't make sense though, because like the SX700 LPT is not made by Enhance, it's made by High Power. So I was like really confused what was going on. So I went and looked at the Silverstone listing, because it's actually a little unusual that it's listed under Enhance instead of Lian Li. So basically what it is Lian Li, I guess, just didn't want to go to the trouble and expense of getting it certified under their own name. And then the Silverstone listing also had reference to a SX800 LTI. So I emailed Tony at Silverstone. He's like their product manager. And he confirmed that, yes, they do have a 800-watt titanium unit in development. And what the deal was with the other numbers is like Enhance will, so that they don't have to go and get the unit certified again later for the same platform, is they'll just submit every model number they think that their customers would possibly want. So that kind of tells me that this must have been in development for a while if they submitted the SX700 LPT, because that's already out, or well, it's been released. It's not available at retail in North America yet. But that's made by High Power. So this must have been in development for a while. But yeah, he confirmed that, yes, they do have an 800-watt titanium, and then we did end up seeing some pictures and stuff of it. And it's very, very similar to the PE750. They're both based on the same platform. They'll have the same kind of connector layout. So yeah, really, really exciting. Like, the main thing I'm hoping for, though, is that I'm hoping the low load fan behavior is improved and it's more similar to the way the 700 watt behaves, because I'm not super happy with how it behaves on the Li & Li. So hopefully we'll see some improvements there. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to think of, just even say like 2 years ago, when the best you could do was the 600 watt Silverstone SFX. And that was really the only choice if you wanted to have like a high wattage small power supply. And now we have like just everybody and their brother, it seems like, is coming out with SFX units. And now we have like a 700 watt, a 750 watt, and now an 800 watt titanium SFXL. It's just really, it's really empowering to be able to have these units so you can design small cases for them, which made it kind of all the more disappointing that we didn't really see any good SFF cases. But yeah, hopefully now that these power supplies exist, we'll see kind of like more manufacturers design cases to really take advantage of them.
For sure. No, it was a cool bit of research that led to us figuring that out. And I was not expecting at all, 800 watt or titanium or now. Or not now, but soon. And so it's hard for me to even consider, like, wow, when would you need this? I can see why people would want it, but 800 watts is an insane amount. That's
I don't think it's really. I think it's intended more because so many people overestimate how much wattage they need. Like, I don't expect that very many people will ever actually use anywhere near 800 watts out of it. I think it's to like, so that in the future, as they develop cases that are more like SFXL only, that people will be more comfortable with that without having ATX power supply support, because they can get 800 watts. So I think it's more for marketing rather than like they actually see a market for 800 watt power supplies. Because yeah, there's not, like, even an ATX rig, there's not a whole lot of use for 800 watt power supplies. Yeah. Like, if you actually crunch the numbers and like look at how much power your components need, that's rather unusual. Like, even for ATX, unless you're doing like tri or quad GPUs, it's kind of overkill. Which NVIDIA is trying to kill that, though. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a fair drop off in the how many really high wattage units you see developed.
Yeah. What I will say is that the benefit of very high rated power supply, titanium, all this, is that, if you're running at a lower wattage, in theory the noise will be improved because the cooling demand will be less because it's rated for a lot more. But beyond that, man, oh man, it's crazy. All right, what else do we have on the list here? I'm seeing, we need to talk through we need to talk through the roundups we did recently. This was actually basically following Computex, just trying to summarize basically all of the announcements in two regards. A, storage, more specifically SSDs, but then also in terms of motherboards, I know we were complaining earlier that there wasn't nearly as much as we were hoping for, but there was still some stuff of interest. So, James, did you write both of these, or?
Yes, and let's see, for the motherboards first, because there's not much to talk about. So ASRock had 2 micro ATX, but they're not really new so much as we just got a little bit more information about them at Computex. So they're part of the Hyper series, which is their motherboards that have they've added a third-party clock generator, so that way you can do base clock overclocking on non-Z170 and non-K processors and boards. So I'm not sure how I feel about this. I've Intel and I think Asus did a podcast on overclock.net or I forget where they did it, but they had talked about why both Intel and kind of Asus from the CPU and the motherboard side they're not really supportive of this type of overclocking because there's just kind of side effects that they're not comfortable allowing in kind of consumer products. So I'm not sure how I feel about this kind of type of overclocking, but anyway, ASRock has 2 micro ATX boards that are part of this series. So you have the B150M Pro 4 Hyper and the H110M DS Hyper. Other than the Hyper part overclocking thing, though, neither board's particularly special. They're just kind of fairly standard, micro ATX boards otherwise. But yeah, they're both kind of current plan is to release those in July this year for around $100. So there's those. And then BioStar did have one that was really interesting, though. So it's the BioStar H170 GTN. Not a whole lot of information about it. It's a mini ITX Skylake board. And probably the coolest thing about it is that it has a UDOP2 port on it. Or actually, this gets a little confusing because UDOT2 technically refers to the connector on the SSD, and this would be the mini SAS HD connector. But the motherboard industry seems to have kind of standardized on this for the motherboard side of a UDOT2 drive.
Yeah.
But one of my kind of annoyances with the way BioStar did it, though, is that it's an angled port. So it's not like the Asus Maximus 8 Impact. It's on this one, it's on the right side of the board, right below the 24-pin connector, and it's angled outward. So that would definitely cause problems in cases like the Ncase M1, because it has the SFX power supply right up against the board. So yeah, it may not even fit in an M1 at all because the connector sticks out past the edge of the board, it looks like. So there's a possibility in the M1 that the SFX power supply may be in the way. So you may not even be able to use this board at all. But other than that, the other interesting thing with it is that it has the U.2 port, but it also has a M.2 port on the back side of the motherboard. So it has both, which I'm not sure exactly how that works because they're both PCIe 3.0 X4 slots according to the a little spec sheet, which the chipset has that many, but the chipset only has a 3.0 X4 connection back to the processor. So I'm not sure what would happen if you had both of these used at the same time. I'm assuming you would only kind of be able to run at the 3.0 X4 across the both of them, and if you tried to run them both at the same time, you'd only get half speed or something. So, but it is cool that you have both those. So that way, we'll talk about it in the SSD roundup, but the industry seems to be kind of moving to M.2, but there is still the possibility that U.2 will take off. So with this motherboard, you'd kind of be prepared for both possibilities. And then other than that, MSI had 2 boards. they're both kind of refreshes of older boards. You have the B150M Mortar Arctic, which is a white version of the B150M Mortar. It's more than just like a white version though. Like they've rearranged some of the stuff. So it loses the SATA Express and one of the PCIe X1 slots and gets a M.2 in its place. And then you have the the C236M Workstation 10G, which is the kind of the same thing. It loses SATA Express and loses one of the PCIe slots to get an M.2. But one of the biggest differences is obviously it has a 10 gig NIC on it. I'm not sure how much of a use case there is for this, because I mean it has a 10 gig NIC, but otherwise it's kind of it's nothing real special. Yeah, it's interesting. So hopefully the main thing with 10 gig though is that the NICs themselves are coming down in price, so you can either buy a card for not too much money, or you can even buy motherboards now. But the switches, last I looked, were still pretty expensive, so not sure how much market there is for stuff like this. But yeah, that's basically it for motherboards though. Like one ITX, a couple kind of interesting micro ATX, and that's it.
Well, that's okay. So that covers boards, and I don't know if anyone else had anything they wanted to add to that. But he also did a overview for storage. I was joking earlier about the dearth of SATA Express, although I think we can all agree that's probably a good thing. But, there was some movement in some of the other form factors. I know in the roundup you focused not on 2.5 inch, but on kind of the smaller stuff like M.2 et al.
Yeah, I mean, because, I don't know, like personally, like I don't see there being any future for 2.5 inch drives other than just bulk storage. Like, you're bottlenecked by the SATA interface for performance, so there's nothing really interesting going on there. And, so really all that's left is just if you need lots of space, which that's not really particularly interesting to talk about. So yeah, I basically just skipped it. There wasn't anything really exciting with the 2.5 inch drives anyway, so I don't think I was really leaving anything interesting out. So mostly just focused on like M.2, quite a few M.2 announcements. So I think Samsung has still yet to release their 1 terabyte Samsung 950 Pro drive. But ADATA announced a 2 terabyte NVMe M.2 drive. So that'll be exciting once that makes to market, whenever that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple other 2 terabyte drives were announced, and then I don't think we saw anything that's really pushing the limit in terms of performance, because the 950 Pro is already a really fast drive. So mostly it's terms of storage. Plexstore has one that will come with like a little heatsink, which is cool because there's been kind of some concerns about like the thermal throttling on some of these like the Samsung drives. So it's cool that they'll have one that will come with like a little stick-on heatsink for their M.2. So mostly what I was interested in is just the number of people coming out with drives. You got ADATA, Crucial, Galax, which used to be Galaxy, Micron, Patriot, Plexstore, PNY, OCZ. So they're all either like OCZ, the RD400 is actually already out. A bunch of reviews came out right at the start of Computex, and the rest of them were showing off drives that I think are all due before the end of the year. So we'll have quite a few drives to choose from in the next several months. There's a couple of PCI Express card drives shown, though from what I can tell, as far as I know, they're all just the M.2 version stuck on a card with a heatsink attached. So nothing particularly special there as far as performance or anything. They're just basically the same drives. And then there were there's some debate on the forum about the form factor, but there were 2 U.2 drives shown. ADATA had one, and then Galax had one. So I don't know. I'd be curious what your guys' thoughts. I'm personally not that fond of U.2 as far as the SFF form factor because like the connector like it's kind of a bulky form factor. Like the drives are typically a lot thicker than normal 2.5-inch drives in order to fit the heat sinks. The cable is kind of messy because you have this like thick cable that has the power splitting off of it, and then like the connector on the motherboard side is kind of big. So I don't know. Like, what do you guys think of like just U.2 as like a form factor?
I think that any of its benefits are gone 2 years from now once the density problem with M.2 is solved. Basically.
I will second that.
You know, you already have like Samsung, and I think it was mentioned in this roundup, but Samsung released literally a single chip that had like either 256 or half a terabyte of storage. And the controller, 512, all the storage, all the controller. The performance wasn't spectacular, but it was still pretty good, and it was on a single chip. So yeah, I think it's going to be really hard because M.2, the beauty of it is it's adaptable, the form factor, it's tiny, it works great in everything from desktops to mobile. So I think everything save for like tablets and smartphones, M.2, and even some tablets, I guess, M.2 will be kind of the way to go. And then if you really need an even more integrated solution, sort of putting it all on one die like that, as Samsung has demonstrated, would be sort of the next step up. And that's essentially how most tablets and smartphones work now, except they just sort of have separate, they have a separate controller versus storage controller versus the actual storage cells, and now those can be integrated too and save some space. So I suspect that those will be the two that kind of lead the day, and you know, anything else that's around, you know, it's either going to enable more capacity or marginally more performance. The performance thing's being obviated pretty quickly because that's more of a controller dependency than a bandwidth dependency at this point. And then, you know, all you need is density to go up and you'll solve the storage issue. I don't think people's storage needs have really been scaling much at all in the past 3 to 5 years. But as SSDs have gotten cheaper and cheaper and you can get more for your money, that's made it a lot easier for more people to move on to them as their total storage solution rather than as like their boot drive and then supplant that with a hard drive or, I don't know, cloud storage or something to get by. So I think economies of scale and the ever cheapening, ever increasing density of flash is going to solve this problem and basically allow M.2 to be the standard for everyone. But that's just my opinion.
No, I agree. Like, really the only real advantage I see at this point for U.2 is the thermal throttling thing, because I mean, most motherboards do place the M.2 slots like underneath where the video card would be. So that is a bit of a problem. I think that's going to be solved with just smaller process nodes for the controller itself, because that's the main heat generating component. So once the controllers get more efficient, then the heat will be less of a problem. Plus, I think like the M.2 spec doesn't allow for heat sinks because it's there's not enough room. But that's mostly for like laptops where there's no room. So I think we'll see a lot more like M.2 drives that are being sold for the desktop market. I think we'll start seeing a lot of them follow Plex Store and have them just come with like a little stick-on heatsink that'll between that and then the efficiency improvements as years go by, I think will really address the thermal throttling problem. So yeah, at that point, there's really not a whole lot of advantage for U.2.
Agree.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. Also, did you guys see the Samsung 500 gigabyte 750 EVO that just came out or is coming out for $150?
Yeah. Like the only problem impressive. I have with the 750s is that they don't use the VNAND, so they're using the same planar stuff, which they had all the problems with the 840 EVO. So I'm a little leery of it, because actually, like at work, we have several of the 840 vanilla, not the EVO, and those never got the firmware fix. So like we basically have been accumulating them from machines that are out in the field. Whenever they come in for repair, we'll swap those out because they'll never get so far, Samsung has made no indication that they're ever going to come out with a firmware fix for the vanilla 840s. So I'm rather annoyed at them for that, because I have all these drives that they're great drives, except after 2 weeks they run like dirt, and like I can't do anything with them. Like they're never going to get fixed. So I mean, I really like the 850 Evo because like the vertical NAND really kind of resets the clock on like the whole like
oh, for sure.
Process node size and stuff like that.
In so many ways, because it's not only you can get more storage, but you can use a thicker or larger process node, which is not only cheaper, but it's also more reliable.
Yeah, so like the 850s, I have no problem using those, because I don't think we're ever going to have the same kind of problem we had with the 840s, but I am annoyed that the vanilla 840s aren't fixed, and so that makes me leery of the 750s, because they're still using the same planar NAND. So, but I mean, I guess it's kind of like for the price, though, they're pretty tempting.
Yeah, I think these would be used more for maybe content creators or media storage, when you don't necessarily, well, maybe not content creation, but maybe just as a backup drive where you don't really need top performance. Because Tweaktown did a review on it, and they don't perform as well, obviously, as the 850s or obviously the 950s, but they do perform fairly well, and it was reasonably close, especially when you look at how cheap it is. If they could come out with a 1 terabyte version for like 200 or like 225 somehow, that would be incredible. I think that would be a game changer.
And bear in mind, like, I mean, those performance metrics might matter to someone that's editing 4K video, someone that's editing photos, podcasts, exactly. Music, etc. Like, they're gonna appreciate the jump from a hard drive to an SSD, but the degree of performance the SSD provides relative to other SSDs is not gonna matter. So they're just gonna care more about, I want as much storage on any given fast, speedy SSD as possible for the money, and then this is gonna be right up their alley.
Yeah,
because they can just move everything onto that drive and not have to think about it.
Yep.
So I'd also argue that it's the right sort of move for people that like are building rigs, and want to like store all their games or whatnot on it. I think for whatever reason, that the people who are building gaming rigs at the high end of the market tend to focus way too much on the performance of the storage when it really doesn't matter.
I cut my load time by 1 second. Also,
yeah. So we're honestly at the point where like mid to low range SSDs are basically going to be plenty speedy for the vast majority of people, even in the context of like it being an upgrade to get ludicrous speed from a traditional hard drive. So I would probably recommend to most people building anything to just get that. Like it really it really requires some specific use cases before I'm like, okay, you really need to consider moving towards like a drive that can provide 2 gigs per second of read speeds.
Right.
Not many people ever notice that. So, but hey, it's exciting. I mean, more SSD storage for cheaper. Everyone wins, and we've been able to enjoy this sort of consistent curve of that improving. And
also, it's exciting because you'll start. Hopefully, what I'm hoping is you'll start to see external and portable drives with SSDs in them, high capacity SSDs.
Oh, for sure.
That's really
I didn't cover them in the roundup, but yeah, there were several like external portable SSDs also were shown. Like either some of them I think are custom, but I think a lot of them are just a package of they just packaged up their M.2 drive, and just threw a USB adapter on there and called it a day. So yeah, that'll be interesting, especially like with the USB 3.1 and Type C and all that. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah. For sure.
Exciting future.
That's how it always is, right? I'm super excited for what I can't have yet. And then the moment you have it, you're like, oh, well, this is okay. But I'm actually really excited about what I can't have yet again. We're really good at that. All right. Well, you know what? I think we've covered most of the important bits that there are to cover, at least when it came to Computex. And that's really going to do it in terms of our news coverage, as you can imagine, immediately following that dump of news and information, it's been a bit more quiet following. But that leads us into the freaking fantastic, functional, fully favorite forum thread of the fortnight. I cannot believe I just said that correctly the first time I read it. So look for this in the show notes. It's a sort of marginally off topic, but still semi-related conversation that's been happening on the forum. That started relatively recently, actually. I think iForlicht was the person who initiated the conversation. The title is SFF Keyboards. And it was basically just people talking through the keyboards they use, what sort of size they're comfortable with, or what's like the minimum, the smallest size they'd be willing to go with. And, you know, I mean, obviously the focus was a bit on just like keyboards you can get that are fairly compact, but a lot of people just ended up sort of sharing their own keyboards and what they consider to be important. And of course, the ever ongoing conversation of, you know, who uses a numpad and what's the point of a numpad, or how a numpad's awesome. And then keyboard layouts, and then wireless versus wired keyboards, and then key switches. Like, it astounds me how far people can take a conversation about keyboards. And if you're wondering, this forum thread is for you. It has been interesting. I tossed my hat into it. I made my recommendation of Apple's terribly named Magic keyboard. It's expensive, but I actually quite like it. I know someone that purchased a bunch of hardware and they got a Magic keyboard, and it's actually pretty nice for what it is, and also tiny and wireless and interesting. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have contributed to this at all, but it's just been fun for me to see like what people care about in a keyboard and really, really care about in a keyboard, because some people can be very, very discerning.
I haven't posted, but I will after the podcast. I just use a Logitech illuminated keyboard. I have to have a number pad. I'm one of those people. I just have to have a number pad. I can't.
You monster.
I feel like really weird. Even using my Surface keyboard, I'm like, oh God, I wish this had a number pad. But yeah, I guess some people, I guess it really doesn't matter. But for work and stuff, it's just much easier, I feel like.
Yeah, like I originally got a 10 keyless with a separate numpad because at the time I was gaming a lot. So it makes sense for that because you can kind of, like a 10 keyless is good for gaming because you can have it closer to your mouse. So it's a more comfortable position for like your wrists. But like I don't game as much now, and like I do a lot of data entry for like the reviews, like just a bunch of recording numbers and stuff, and then so stuff like that is, I really wish I had like a normal keyboard now, because the problem with my separate number pad is it doesn't. Here's an interesting thing a lot of people don't realize is that on your normal keyboard, the numpad outputs different signals than the number row across the top of the keyboard.
Yep.
Like, they're not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Like the numpad puts out a num0, num1, num2, which are considered different, which most people, it's not going to make a difference. But the thing is like, if you need to like map keys, like keyboard shortcuts to a program, like it becomes a problem if your number pad doesn't actually output num keys, because you can't treat them separately than the top row. So then there goes like 9 or 10 keys that you could have mapped out. So yeah, I'm partial to cherry reds, like mechanical. So I have a hard time just kind of like dumping it and getting a normal key or like a full size keyboard, since I already have them. So I'm kind of waiting for like it to break. But it's mechanical though, so I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So I may have to help it along, so I can justify getting a normal keyboard.
I will say that the Apple standard full width keyboard, and I've used the Compact Magic one, they're really good keyboards. Even though I'm a documented Apple hater, they really are good keyboards. I can't even deny.
Yeah, and it's nice too, because for a while, I mean, I have my Retina MacBook Pro, and then I had just their wireless keyboard, and it's nice because the layout is totally identical. And so moving from one to the next is kind of effortless, and they look nice and whatever. What's interesting about the Magic Keyboard is that so when Apple launched their MacBook, which is like their mid-range, very super thin, ultralight, whatever. They introduced this very new keyboard with what they called butterfly key switches. And so basically with the key switches, it was two things. One, the keyboard itself was a lot shallower because it needed to be for them to make the thing so thin. And so the key travel is very, very light. Like there's very little key travel. You got to get used to it. And I think some people, you just never could. It's so thin. But they moved from like the scissor switches, which are in all the keyboards they ever made for laptops and whatnot up to that point, to these butterfly switches. And one of the benefits of that is that whereas you have like this kind of wobbliness with standard key switches, with these butterfly switches, it's really like pressing a button or like an actuator or something, and the movement there's no wobbliness. It's just like when you're pressing down the whole button. Like it's hard to describe, but you definitely feel it. It actually feels kind of nice. And so when they made they call it the Magic Keyboard, they went from like, instead of AA's, now it's like an integrated lithium-ion battery. It's actually really handy because so the way you charge it is it uses a lightning port, so the same port that's on like a phone or a tablet. So you can so first off, they give you effectively an iPhone or iPad charging cable when you buy it, which of course I like because I go through those like nobody's business.
That's only like a $200 value.
Yeah, right. The other thing is that pairing Bluetooth can sometimes be wonky. So if you take your charger cable, right, and you plug the USB into your computer and then the lightning port into the keyboard, it automatically pairs it. So you can do that, charge it, and then when you unplug it, it'll still work because it's a wireless keyboard. So that's sort of like a nice touch. The most impressive thing, though, is that although it's the same key switches as the MacBook, the key travel is actually a lot deeper because they can make it deeper. And when it is as deep as it is on that keyboard with the key switches that it has on the MacBook, it's actually a really nice keyboard to type on. The price of it's ludicrously expensive. It's like $140 or something. So like I don't know that I'd ever buy it standing alone. Although you can get it for like a subsidized amount when you buy it with a computer. I might do it in that instance. But like I think it's a very nice keyboard for what it is. The only thing I don't like is I don't like that they did the thing with the arrow keys where the sizing is different because they're trying to fill the space. That to me feels a little wonky because I actually tend to use the bare spots as sort of an anchor or reference point for my pinky. So losing that's a little annoying, but it's a minor point. Other than that, I think they did a pretty good job.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, but my actual keyboard that I use, I don't have that keyboard. The actual keyboard that I use hooked up to my Thunderbolt display, so whenever I'm at my desk, I use it, is a Razer Lycosa, which I actually bought during, I think this would have been my sophomore year of high school, so that was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it was like 7.5, 8 years ago. Basically 8 years ago. And I remember I got it like the only reason I got it was because I was looking at like a cheaper Razer keyboard because I'm a gamer and I want to be cool, and I already got the Mamba wireless mouse, which is also the mouse I'm still using, which now I'm realizing is 8 years old.
You have a Mamba that still works?
Wow, that's
crazy. Like,
okay.
Jesus.
Wait, okay, go ahead. Say what you're gonna say.
Like, both the older Razer Lycosas and the older Mambas, all the ones I've ever seen are either like just kind of work, don't work at all, or just they're like falling to pieces.
Right. So my Mamba is definitely starting to do that. It has these rubber grips on the side, and one of them has just come off completely, and the other one is threatening to. The other thing is that I lost the door on the bottom of it for the battery bay a while ago. And so I've turned my mouse over, I'm looking down, I'm looking in it, and it's got like the small lithium ion battery cell, right? There's a noticeable bulge there. So I always have my mouse plugged in just because it's on a tray and there's no reason not to have it plugged in. And also just because I could never get it to consistently work across operating systems when I go back and forth between OS X and Windows wirelessly. So I've just sort of lived with having it plugged in. But yeah, no, I mean, the mouse is fine and it has worked fine and it's comfy. And the keyboard, you'll be pleased to know that not only has it survived, I've actually dumped a tall, cold glass of soda on this keyboard and it managed to survive even that. If you type closer to the left side of the keyboard, you notice that the keys are a bit mushier than if you type closer to the right side of the keyboard. That you guys will be pleased to know the numpad is perfect. The numpad is pristine.
That's all that matters.
Yep, you're good to go.
But no, and it's backlit and yeah, it gets the job done. The only thing I never have really liked about it is on the top right hand corner, it's got this sort of like touch panel-y, like not buttons, but like touch sensitive controls for volume and brightness and whatnot, and they're
the capacitive switches.
Yeah, and they're incredibly wonky and suck and don't work at all. Like maybe 1/3 of the time do I press what I want to do and it actually registers as doing what I want, because it's not just that it's inconsistent about noticing if I'm touching it, it's inconsistent about noticing what I'm trying to do. Like it'll be like, okay, I need to turn this down, and it's like, oh, you want to turn the brightness of the keyboard off. Oh, okay. Like, no, that's not what I want to do. And then I do it again. And they're like, oh, you want to turn the brightness of the keyboard back on? I'm like, yes. And then I want to turn the volume down. Oh, turn it up all the way. Okay. No. It's
lasted so long it's become self-aware. And
yeah,
a bit of a troll.
It needs some help is what I'm getting at here. But it gets the job done. And I've been telling myself for a long time I probably should replace both my keyboard and mouse, but it's just one of those things where it's like I don't really actively dislike them, and you can spend as much money as you want to on those things, and I don't really want to spend money, so I'm probably going to use them until they fail. But yeah, I guess I got my money back if they lasted 8 years.
Absolutely. Have any of you guys tried out the Logitech, the K900, the newer mouse, with like the wireless mouse that's faster than a wired mouse supposedly?
No, I haven't tried it.
I want to check one out. I have yet to try it either, but I hear it's amazing.
I haven't been in the market, so I don't know if this is still a thing, but I remember at the time, the topic was DPI for mice. Right. And like Razer was like, oh my god, with the Mamba, it's like 5,800 DPI, and it's just like, can humans even really...
Yeah, it's basically like the megapixel thing with cameras.
Yeah.
The mouse makers have kind of backed off on the DPI because they've really just kind of hit the limit of like what's practical. So yeah, I don't see as much stuff on DPI now.
Good. Because it seemed like a stupid conversation even in the time. Like the reason I got the Mamba was because I had a friend that had one and tried it and I really quite liked it, and I'm like, okay, I want it. I want to be able to like, I want to have a wireless mouse that's easy to plug in and charge, and I can dock it and whatnot. And then I almost never use that wireless, but oh well. Oh man,
I'm all wired up these days. I used to be wireless everything. Now I've got wires.
I'm sorry, man. I mean, in my ideal world, I would have a wireless keyboard and mouse, and if I ever build a desktop, I'll probably splurge and get that as well. The one thing I will say I love about my current setup is that it's one cable to plug into my laptop, and then I can hide away all my cables for everything else, and those plug into my monitor. So my desktop surface is actually pretty clean, and then my keyboard and mouse are in like a tray that rolls underneath the top surface. So I really have like maybe two, like I can see 2 wires right now. The wires for my microphone and the wire connecting my laptop to my monitor, and that's it. And that makes me a very happy boy.
Am I the only one that doesn't see the point in a wireless keyboard for a desktop?
Oh, it's great. It. Oh, I love it. Are you kidding me?
I love it.
Wires. Cables are terrible. You have no limit to, because here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the thing, John. You have a choice. You have a choice when it comes to a wired keyboard. You can either have like freedom of, or excuse me, you can either have it be as neat as possible, right? So like that cable is taut, right? So it's as neat as a cable can be, but now that keyboard isn't moving anywhere. Or you can have free range of motion. You can move the keyboard around. You got lots of crap on your desk because you're doing research. Like my desk is covered in all sorts of papers and other junk right now because I've been doing a lot of work, right? And, you know, I need to move my keyboard around to make room for stuff, or I'm, you know, shifting around or whatever, and I can have that, but now I have to have like 3 feet of cabling just all over the goddamn place, and it looks awful, and it makes me feel terrible, and it's bad, and you should feel bad. With a wireless keyboard, you don't have to have that choice. You can have the best of both worlds. You can get rid of this ugly, terrible cable 99% of the time, and you get the free range of motion of it. You can just throw that keyboard wherever you want. I mean, it's 2016 for Christ's sake.
Yeah, but
we shouldn't have to have cables for our peripherals. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I'm kind of got the setup where I've got a monitor riser. It's for ergonomic reasons, and my keyboard basically sits right up against it, so cables is not I don't see it anywhere.
You can see them.
Nope.
But here's the thing: even if you can't see them, you know they're there.
And I don't care. That, and I run a $5 keyboard, so.
Yeah, it's just, and
I use a keyboard tray to hide.
Exactly, I use a keyboard tray, so this isn't a problem for me. But like, I use a keyboard tray. I consider that to be a compromise. I prefer.
It is.
I
would much rather have
the
clean
surface.
Spartan desktop with no wires and no nothing. It's just the hassle of having to recharge and stuff is kind of annoying.
The sacrifices we have to make in this life.
First world problems.
Sacrifices we have to make.
But I respect your wireless setup there. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, my mouse is wireless, but as soon as it dies, I'm going back to wired.
Yeah, see, mice are super annoying because at least the keyboards last a long time. But mice, it's like you're recharging it every week, or if you're a heavy user. So
really?
That part is really annoying, depending on what mouse you get. But
my mouse takes disposable batteries, so it's not a big deal. But my mouse is 5 years old. Yeah, 5 years old. By a non-name brand. So
I can't have the oldest keyboard and mouse here, can I?
My keyboard was manufactured in 2003.
Okay, yeah, you've definitely got me beat there.
It has an IBM logo on it. IBM doesn't make hardware anymore. They haven't done for years.
Yeah. See, I wonder what my dream keyboard would be. It would either be like the Magic keyboard that I mentioned before, or like go completely the other direction and like take an original Apple or IBM keyboard and just I don't know, because I love the feel of them. I hate the goddamn noise. Clack, 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 clack. It sounds like you're...
Yep.
Ugh.
I'm with you on that.
Headache inducing. But like I love it feels substantial. Like it feels like you're typing the email of your life every time you use one of these things. Like you can feel it. It's just
the feeling of importance flows over every word.
Yeah. But it sounds like, I don't know.
The thing is, you want a loud keyboard because that way your boss knows you're actually doing work, and they don't come over and check you.
Clack. So what you need to do then is modify your keyboard so it doesn't make those noises, but like record a 2-hour loop of you using it, and then like set up a little Bluetooth speaker and play that like right by your office door or like to the entrance to your cubicle, and then people will be like, "My God,
people still have cubicles?
Josh was on fire." Yeah, I don't. I work in an open office. I hate it.
Zero privacy whatsoever?
Oh, zero. None. I mean, there are some things that are handy about it, but, oh, man. Come on.
I mean, I'm changing jobs. I left my last job yesterday, pretty much, and started my new job on Monday, and both the open office layouts. My new office has even less privacy. So expect less posting on the forum from me during the working day.
Every surface, every wall is made of glass.
It's not quite that bad, but it's a very cozy office, I'll put it that way.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, my work situation, it's a little overstuffed right now. And they, it's like one of those things where for the past year I've been there, they've been saying, oh no, we're going to be moving some people around like any month now, and then we'll have room and everything will be great. And then they never do it. And I die a little bit inside.
You're working at AMD apparently.
Oh, whoa. Whoa.
Boom. I went there.
Well, see, Intel's got plenty of open cubicles given all the people they just laid off. Whoa. Whoa.
That they do. Stretch out, guys.
Nvidia's like the only company that's just like hashtag winning.
No, I'm pretty sure they did a massive layoff a couple of years ago.
Nvidia did?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did.
Really? Was this like 2009 or? Hold on, I'll look it up. Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff from 2015.
Yeah, layoff tied to future Icera business sale.
Never heard of Icera.
Okay, everyone's a
that
loser.
Was their.
I take it back.
It was supposed to be like a cellular modem stuff.
They
were going to do a big push into cellular, like radios and modems and things like that to go along with the integrated like mobile platforms.
Tegra.
Yeah, Tegra. Yeah, but that never went anywhere. So.
No kidding.
Tegra was good. It was just expensive and a battery hug.
Apparently, they dumped 6.5% of their workforce.
Well, yeah, and expensive and a battery hug are incompatible with the mobile platform. That's why it didn't go anywhere.
But the performance was there. That's for sure.
I mean, this is true. But it's like saying Nvidia's entering the mattress business, and for only $3,500.
But it's very comfortable.
Yeah. Exactly. They'll be like, it's the most comfortable mattress ever, but it costs $3,500, and the stuffing is made of squeaky toys. So whenever you move in bed... That's me rolling onto my side on an Nvidia branded mattress.
I think it's about time we wrapped up.
Yeah.
On that note, I would agree.
On that positive note, to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've been enjoying this conversation as much as we have. My name is Josh Ramirez, aka Playful Phoenix. Today I was joined by all 4 J's, or all 3 J's, not including me. That, of course, is James, aka Abophobia, Jay, aka Tech Everything, and John, aka Confucius. All right. I've certainly got a busy next few weeks coming up. How about you guys? How about you, John?
New job tomorrow. So much going on. It's absurd.
I know the feeling for what it's worth.
I'm at the point in life where if something bad doesn't happen in the space of a week, something's going wrong and I don't know about it.
Oh, man. Well, things will get better. Hang in there, brother.
Like I had a really great day today until the clothes dryer died.
Oh, no. I'll just go retro and hang them on a clothesline.
And I had a really great day yesterday until I got soaked walking down to my new job to sign the contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
Well, things can only go up. That's what I keep telling myself. Things can only go up. How about you, Jay?
I have work as always, ever busy, and on the tech side, I have the shuttle PC I'll be doing a review on, and also Logic Supply is sending out their new, I think it's called the CL100. It's a media streaming PC, really tiny, VESA mountable little tiny box. So that'll be interesting when I get that in next week.
Nice. Oh, I look forward to hearing more about that.
Oh yeah.
And how about you, James?
Mainly, I'm gonna keep an eye out and see if there's any more Computex news, and hopefully, like something more interesting will be coming out. I'm really hoping like maybe ASUS or somebody had a neat motherboard hiding in a corner, and like nobody thought to write an article of it till now. But other than that, Yeah, I'm not really. I don't really have much on my plate right now.
Fair enough. Well, we'll all be looking for those mythical motherboards. But until next time, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.